Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let me try to elaborate a bit what our executive director told you. So, we have in this outlook two major findings, among other things, and the first one is the fact that the foundations of global energy system are shifting substantially with implications for everybody. It is mainly as a result of the resurgence of oil and gas production in US, Canada, and in Iraq, a country in the Middle East with huge potential and a very different investment framework compared to some other countries in the region. Second, we observed that after Fukushima, the plans of nuclear power in several countries changed. Germany, Switzerland, Japan, and maybe in France. Therefore, our projections this year for nuclear power is about 10% lower than what we had last year. Third, we see that in the last 9 to 12 months, at least 4 major countries put new legislations in terms of energy efficiency. Europe, Japan, China, and the United States. So these 3 elements together, as we will try to describe you in a minute, change the many things that we thought are the key stones of the energy sector, and there is a new landscape that with significant consequences. Another point, when we look at the current energy context today, as of beginning of this month, when you look at the prices, we have the highest oil prices ever on average up to now, and as such, it plays a role, a negative role, in terms of the global economic recovery efforts. But when we look at the natural gas prices, we see a major difference between US vis-a-vis Europe and Asia. Only 5 years ago, the gas prices were more or less the same in these 3 regions, $1 or $2 maximum difference, and today, on average, European prices are 5 times higher than the US levels, and in Asia about 8 times higher than the United States levels. Another point, as point of departure, as our executive director told you, we are still on an unsustainable energy path. We saw a 30% jump in the fossil fuel subsidies to $523 billion last year, and this is mainly driven by the Middle East and North African countries. In the year 2010, some of those countries had significant intentions to reform their energy prices, but we see that after the Arab Spring, that appetite faded out, and we have seen even increase in subsidies. Last year, carbon dioxide emissions increased by a significant amount, about 1 gigaton, which is a record high. And at the same time, a very important fuel, renewables, which is crucial to address the climate change and energy security, is growingly under pressure. In terms of the investments, in terms of the subsidies, we see a major pressure on renewable industry. And finally, as we always do, we look at the electricity access issue, and today 1.3 billion people, about 20% of the global population, still has no access to electricity despite the international efforts. Now let me look at a bit the global picture and the future. What we see here is that the share of the OECD countries, our member countries, in the global energy use is declining very significantly. around 1975, two-thirds of the energy was consumed in the OECD countries, and it will be in 20 years of time, it will go down to one-third only. And this will be mainly coming, the growth in the non-OECD countries from China, India, and Middle East, driven by their economic growth and the people wanting to have better living standards similar to those in the OECD countries. So therefore, the center of gravity of the global energy use is moving to east. This is one of the findings. Now, let me move to elaborate a bit our first message on the shifting, what are the drivers of the shifting global landscape. In United States, years and years, we have seen the conventional oil was declining. But as a result of the changes on the so-called light tight oil, the unconventional oil, we see a major increase in the US oil production after this decline we have observed. So as a result of that, I can tell you that around 2017, United States will be the largest oil producer of the world, overtaking Saudi Arabia. And this is, of course, a major development and will have definitely significant implications. And on the natural gas front too, we have seen the conventional gas in the United States was declining many years. And as our executive director told you, we have highlighted a few years ago in our Golden Age of Gas study that as a result of the changes, we expect the unconventional gas to grow substantially in the United States. Just to put it in context, in the last 5 years, US gas production increased about 200 BCM, which is equal to, in 5 years, which is equal to the current gas exports of Russia only. And as a result of these developments, around 2015, US will be the clear leader of the global gas production, overtaking Russia with a significant difference. Now, this is happening in the United States. Similar activities happening in Canada. And another country which is crucial to define the new global landscape is Iraq. Iraq is producing today about 3 million barrels per day. And in our central scenario, which is significantly lower than the government's expectations, it causes 6 million barrels per day in 2020 and about 8 million barrels per day in 2035. And why Iraq is a part of the changing global landscape? A lot of oil coming to the market, and it is very cheap to produce that oil in Iraq. According to our numbers, about 15 times cheaper than the Canadian oil sands, for example, about 7 times lower than the Russian oil production, and therefore provides a lot of oil and gas to the markets. And as you know, unlike some of its neighbors in Iraq, the international capital can go, companies can go and invest, and therefore it's a different character compared to some other countries in the region. And where will this oil go? The cheap oil and also the significant amount of oil. Currently, about half of that oil goes to Asia and half of it the rest of the world. Europe, North America, and elsewhere. And we see that this is changing significantly. About 80% of oil will go to Asia, and the main address here is China. When we look at the Middle East, the bulk of the oil demand will be met, of course, with Middle East. But when I say talk about the demand, one line perhaps on that, Currently, we are consuming about 88 million barrels per day, and we expect in 2035 it will be close to 100 million barrels per day. And this is mainly driven by the transportation sector, cars, trucks, and jets. A special feature in our work this year is that we gave a close look at the trucks. Because when we talk about oil demand, we automatically think about the cars, but trucks, the use of oil by trucks are approaching those cars in the next years to come, and the trucks in Asia alone are responsible 1/3 of the global oil demand growth. Why trucks are important here? Because the efficiency standards for trucks are less developed compared to cars and others. So, Middle East was exporting only about 50% of its oil to Asia until recently, and we expect this to go to 90% in 2035. So almost every 9 barrel out of 10 barrel exported from Middle East will go to Asia. So therefore, there will be a major new trade axis built between the Middle East and Asia with all its consequences. Perhaps a third point on United States. Until recently, US was importing a significant chunk of its oil from Middle East. According to our projections, in about 10 years of time, the need for Middle East import for United States will be almost zero. So therefore, this may well has its implications for oil markets, but maybe even beyond that. Natural gas. We have highlighted since a few years and followed very closely the shale gas developments, and this will have implications on the international gas markets. This is the current gas trade flows in the world. As a result of the growth in many countries, US, Canada, Australia, and others, we expect that the trade in the next 20 years will be much more diverse and much more complex. More and more countries will export natural gas, and more and more producers are coming in the picture. As I mentioned to you, US will be the clear leader around 2015 as the major producer, while Russia, of course, stays as the most important exporter. And what we see here is that the increasing unconventional oil and LNG means there will be a growing pressure on the conventional gas producers in terms of volumes, but also the hands of the gas importers will be stronger in terms of the price negotiations, especially when it comes to oil-linked pricing mechanisms. A bit more on the import dependency. A major preoccupation of many countries in the context of energy security and the money they pay for the imported energy. This is where we are today. For example, when you look at China, China imports about 15% of its gas, and about half of it is oil. And other countries are also major importers for oil and gas. When we look at the future, we see that in all countries, their oil and gas import dependency is increasing substantially. China, India, Europe, and Japan. But there is one country which goes the other way around, which is the United States. We see that the US becomes a gas exporter, and in terms of oil imports, it will be a very small amount. Now, when we look at the discussions in the international energy debate in the newspapers and so, it is always thought that this is driven only by the growth in US oil production. And this is wrong. Today, US is importing about 10 million barrels per day, and in about 10 years of time, it will go down to around 4 million barrels per day. So 6 million barrels per day of a decline. And out of 6 million barrels per day, about 55% of this drop comes because of the oil production growth that I explained to you, but about 45%, almost a half, is due to the new fuel efficiency standards for cars and trucks in the United States. So the import dependency story, the declining import dependency story, the self-sufficiency story in the United States is not only driven by the growth in the US oil production, but also the steps taken in order to reduce the oil use in the transportation sector and with the new measures taken. Let us turn to the electricity generation briefly. We have reduced the nuclear expectation in Japan, and there will be a growing gas and renewable consumption in Japan with its consequences on the Japanese energy prices. In the European Union, we expect that the wind and solar will still push, gas will grow, and in the medium and longer term, coal will be less and less used. In the United States, we expect that the gas will still push coal out, and until gas prices reach around $6, we will see gas will be the winner. And if it comes around $6, then we may see some coal to come back. And in terms of renewables, mainly driven by, again, the government support, renewables is set to grow. India, again, coal plays a crucial role here, and India will be the largest coal importer of the world around 2020. There's a strong growth there, but even looking at this strong growth, we shouldn't be misled to put the things in a context. Despite this very strong growth, in the year 2035, electricity consumption per capita in India will be equal to the electricity consumption in the United States in 1947. So there will be still 100 years of a gap between rich and poor, and this is definitely a major point to put the things in a context. Then, of course, we have China. China adds in the next 20 years or so to its capacity, existing capacity, 1 US plus 1 Japan of today, to the current one, with all its implications. And of course, China is the largest growth in terms of nuclear power, renewables, all come from China. And globally, we still think that the coal will be the backbone of the electricity generation. Nuclear is, compared to last year, we have lower nuclear expectations, and gas and renewables will grow. I mentioned to you why gas to grow in our gas slides, and let me tell you a bit the renewables. The main reason renewables are growing is the government support. We all need renewables in terms of fighting the climate change and ensuring energy security. And in our projections, renewables share, which is about 20% today in the electricity generation, will be about 1/3 in 2035, and mainly driven by subsidies. Renewable subsidies are today about $88 billion, and mainly coming from US, Europe, and China. But when we look at the future, we see that there will be a substantial amount of renewable subsidies needed. about $4.8 trillion between now and 2035. And about that 4.8 trillion US dollar, half of it is already committed or needed to meet the targets which is mandatory by some countries. And we know that there is a lot of discussion in many countries in Europe, in the United States, and other countries, whether or not to how to address the renewable subsidies, especially in the context of the financial crisis. And therefore, the smart renewable subsidies is a keyword that we wanted to drop here. Now, all of these things, the changes in the oil sector, in the gas sector, and the different countries, what do they mean for the country's competitiveness? We wanted to show you the electricity prices. There is a small gap today with the non-OECD and OECD countries in terms of electricity prices. But when we look at the future, those developments mean there will be a substantial difference in different markets in terms of electricity prices. For example, European electricity prices will be about 50% higher than United States and about 3 times higher than China, 300%. Or Japan, a major trade partner of China, will have about 8 times higher electricity prices. Now, why in Europe, for example, these are higher than United States and others? Because of the following. First of all, the gas prices, the oil index gas prices versus the gas prices that the US is enjoying today. Nuclear, a low generation technology is phased out in some countries. The carbon prices, we have carbon prices in Europe and not in the other countries, and also the renewable subsidies on top of that. So what are the implications of those, the differences in the prices? One implication is, for example, again, if we take Europe as an example, European industries' competitiveness is negatively affected vis-a-vis the ones in China and US because of the higher electricity prices. And second, the purchasing power of the European citizens will be also negatively affected. So this is one major consequence of the changes in the global energy map in terms of their economic positioning in the global energy picture, in addition to their geopolitical positioning as a result of new picture. Another issue is, we look at for the first time, is the water, energy and water. And today, about 15% of the global water uses because of energy sector. And where in energy sector? Mainly in the electricity generation, but also in the biofuels and fossil fuels. And we expect that this will grow substantially, the need for water for the energy sector. And some countries are much more stressed, water stressed than others, such as the United States, such as India and China for electricity generation. Iraq, I mentioned a few minutes ago, Iraq needs substantial amount of water to inject in the fields to get the oil out, and Canadian oil sands, for example, needs a lot of water. Therefore, we think that the availability of water is set to become a crucial factor in assessing the economic viability of energy projects. So beginning of these remarks, we are coming to the end. I said that there are 2 major findings we wanted to share with you today. The first one was the changing global landscape, oil, gas, nuclear developments and their implications in terms of countries' economic and geopolitical positioning. The second one we wanted to talk to you today is a trend we hope to see. This is on energy efficiency. As our executive director told you, every year we look at the fuel, renewables, coal, gas, nuclear, in depth, but this year we chose energy efficiency. When I look at the government's energy policies, I think the energy efficiency is the epic failure of the energy policy making of many countries in the world, because we were not able to use it in the best way. I mentioned in the beginning of our remarks that some countries, US, Europe, China, Japan, are making efforts, and as a result of these efforts, we see that only as this portion of the energy efficiency potential, economically viable energy efficiency potential, is used. For example, in the case of industry, it is about 45% of the potential is used, but in the building sector, the houses, schools, and the others, it is less than 20%. And globally, we don't use 2/3 of the potential we have. And we think there will be a growing need to push the energy efficiency button, and we see that a momentum is building. And we, as the IEA, are going to push this forward in the next months to come. The very fact that the industry here exploits the most of the energy efficiency potential should be a message in itself, because industry sees that there is an economic interest in that, whereas the rest of the sectors are not as developed as industry. So what we have done is that since we have taken energy efficiency as a major issue this year, what we have done is that we have, this is our central scenario. We have built a new scenario, a new vision, which we are going to share with the governments and with the industry in the next months to come, which we call efficient world scenario. The efficient world scenario, this vision, based on the assumption that the governments push the energy efficiency button, but without new technologies, with the existing technologies, and pushing the button of the measures which make complete economic sense. The investments that the consumers have to make will be paid back, in most cases, in 4 to 5 years of time. And we have chosen those, we have made it on a country-by-country basis, sector-by-sector basis, and we chose the measures which brings only net economic benefits. And we said, what happens if the governments push the efficient world scenario, go through this? We have found out that there are huge benefits in terms of energy security, economy, and climate change. And we want to share them with you now. In terms of energy security, we could save significant amount of coal, which is equal to the half of the coal consumption of China today. We can save oil, which is equal to the Russia plus Norway oil production today, and we can save significant amount of gas and other fuels. And the growth of the global energy demand will be halved. So therefore, we will have the same comfort, same lifestyles, nothing changes there, but we will use less energy, which is a good news for, first of all, for energy security for everybody. So good for energy security. Second, in terms of economics. This is in our central scenario, different countries, the consumers have to pay for their fuels. If we go to efficient world scenario, if we use energy more efficiently in our cars, at home for the lighting, in the industry, in the buildings, we can save significant amount of energy and therefore money. This is very much pronounced in China, India, and other consuming countries. If we talk on a layman's basis, in India, a household's income can increase 6% per annum as a result of going in an efficient world. So this is definitely something to take into account. And global economy would increase 0.4% as a result of that in net terms. So good for energy security, good for the economy. Third point on climate change. And some of you may remember that last year we talked about climate change and lock-in issue. What was that? It is the following. The world is going in the wrong direction in terms of climate change, and we see that every day we lose without having an agreement and a major action on climate change. Our aim to have a 2 degrees trajectory in the global temperature, we are getting further and further away from that. Why? Because of the following. The current infrastructure we are building in the absence of that climate agreement, we see that we are locking in our future. In other words, the power plants we have today, the industrial facilities we have today, the cars we have today, if we do not have any new power plant built in the next 20 years, no new power plant built, no new industry facility is built next 20 years, no new cars come on the street, this is the level of emissions which will come from the existing infrastructure. And this means that from the existing infrastructure, we are around 2017, we are looking in from the infrastructure coming CO2 emissions, and we will have no chance to go to 2 degrees and the door will be closed. Current infrastructure, and between now and 2017, the infrastructure which will be made will bring CO2 emissions, and 2017, the door will be closed. So therefore, what is needed is to have a climate agreement before that to give a signal to the investors, the players, so that we can have a low carbon investment coming. But unfortunately, we do not see that there is a significant appetite today to have a climate agreement worldwide. So this is definitely a bad news, because then we will lose the battle. However, even in the absence of a climate agreement, if our efficient world scenario, which is based on the efficiency policies of different countries for different reasons, was to be employed, and if this is employed, then the lock-in day or time can be postponed by 5 years. So efficiency can hold the door to be closed by 5 years, giving us A, time to have an international legally binding agreement, hopefully, and B, perhaps there will be new technologies in the meantime, advanced technology, which could mature and help us to address the climate change. So efficiency can be a way to stop the door to be closed in the year 2017. So let us finish our presentation by putting our thoughts together. Today, in many countries in the world, if not all, the decision makers, policy makers, have 3 objectives in terms of ensuring energy, addressing climate challenges, and the recovery of the economy. And in many cases, it may not be easy to reconcile all these 3 objectives, and therefore one has to be careful when one takes a decision in one of these areas, what will be the consequences for the others. We believe the changing outlook for energy production and use will affect the position of different countries in the global economic and geopolitical picture. Iraq is set to play a crucial role in the global oil markets as a result of its cheap and huge resources. Almost 45% of the growth in global oil production in the next 20 years will come only from Iraq, and the other 55% from the rest of the world. Climate change is sliding down in the agenda, and therefore the cost of inaction to rise. But as just mentioned, we can change this picture by pushing the energy efficiency button, and the policies that we described in our book are all within reach, and they can definitely secure a more sustainable energy system. And I mentioned to you in the beginning, and the implications of a unconventional oil and gas revolution there, but energy efficiency could be another unconventional energy revolution. So thank you.